For IT, it was 1999 and Y2K. For mobile technology, it was 2005 and 2006. And for the utility and energy industries, it's 2019 and 2020 that are disrupting and transforming the industry in ways that, however daunting they may appear, will be the foundation for the energy transition and a sustainable future. Today, we're going to look into the most disruptive, innovative, exciting, and long-lasting impacts that have shaped smart energy, from the US's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement to the rise of EV adoption and how cybersecurity has become both a focus and a concern, and what is set to make history in 2020. Our panel of experts will share their keen insights into unexpected trends and 2019 predictions that never came true, and 2020 predictions of the frontrunners and the outliers. Our expert speakers for today are Torsten Heller, CEO of Greenbird, Kevin O'Donovan, renowned technology evangelist, Jennifer Runyon, content director for Distributech, and Areti Taradimu, content director for Endless Europe. Of course, we're also joined by our team at Smart Energy International. We'll be taking your questions, and there'll be plenty of time to discuss any queries that you may have. We're also joined by the editor of Smart Energy International, Claire Falkvein, who will be moderating today's conversation. Hello, and over to you, Claire.
Thanks very much, Phil, and welcome to everybody. Welcome to our speakers. Thank you for joining us. As mentioned, we are joined by some great speakers to talk about what happened in 2019, the surprises and the predictions that didn't quite come true. And then we're going to do a bit of future predicting with a view to understanding what 2020 will hold for the power, water, and gas sectors. You can read more about our speakers by clicking on the speaker tab on the right-hand side of the screen. Also, if you would like to pose any questions or share some predictions of your own, please feel free to do so by communicating with us on the left-hand side of your screen in the question and answer box. As I mentioned, speakers, thank you so much for joining us. Torsten, I'm going to hand over to you and ask if you could give us a bit of a roundup of some of the significant happenings that you experienced in 2019.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me here again on the webcast, because I think it's a perfect timing now, because I anyway have to prepare my speech for the Christmas party, so I anyway would have to think about what happened in 2019. So 2019, at least for me, it was a lot of traveling, working with a lot of utilities. And what I found is that many utilities, and I was talking and working with utilities in Asia, in the Middle East, in Europe. So most of the topics we are discussing with utilities now are the same. That is something what happened in 2019 because the earlier years, we always had different discussions in Europe, different discussions going on in Asia or the Middle East. And I'm really looking forward to Distributech in San Antonio in January to see. Maybe we have exactly the same discussion with the US utilities, but maybe we have completely different discussions. So that's going to be fun for me. But looking back at 2019, I think I want to focus on three topics. And as Greenbird is a software company, so I have, of course, to focus on software, on technology, on data. So the first thing I want to talk about is digital transformation. Because what I saw in 2019 is digital transformation is the new big data. What I mean is everybody is talking about it. Everybody pretends to do it. But in the end, it seems so nobody really knows what it is. So everybody talks about digital transformation, but what is the meaning of digital transformation? So it seems for me that digital transformation, the wording, has become a hype, a buzzword. But in the end, the focus, and that has turned during 2019, is people stop talking about digital transformation, but what they really talk about is an agile delivery model to deliver digital services. So I think the word digital transformation is on the way down, but at the same time, the focus on exactly the digital topics in the utilities is just rising. So the first tip we would give to people, if you want to do digital transformation, don't call it digital transformation anymore, but focus on agile delivery of digital services. The second topic, which has amazed me in 2019, is that utilities have started to understand the value of their data. What I mean is we have spent a lot of time discussing with the utilities why they would need a modern integration platform, why they should invest in cloud-based technologies, why they should focus on data. And what we have seen now is in 2019, utilities have really understood the value of data. Utilities have really understood the urgency of good data, of data they can access easily, data they have with high quality, data which is accessible. So the need and the urgency for utilities to build up the data foundation, that is one of the topics we have seen that has emerged in 2019. So the focus on data foundation or data virtualization and creating value out of data, that is one of the most amazing things I see for 2019, because that has always been hard discussions with utilities. And the last topic I would like to mention is, and that is also a topic which has excited me and amazed me, the topic or the concept of the platform utility. What we have seen is that a lot of utilities, a lot of our clients have understood that they have to do a choice. So they can either be a simple wire utility or an operator of a commoditized infrastructure, or they can become the platform operator for distributed digital energy system. And these changes and these choices, and what we see in the discussions with the utilities is many utilities are coming to us and discuss with us how can we become the platform utility. So to summarize, what I have seen and what I always will remember for 2019 will be digital transformation. Everybody talks about it. Nobody really knows what it is, but the focus is clearly on an agile delivery model for digital services, the rise of data, the importance of the data foundation and data virtualization to drive the energy transition, and the utilities activities to really become these platform utilities. That is for me 2019.
Torsten, thanks very much. It's quite interesting to hear your perspective on some of the important happenings of the year, and we'll get back to discussing some of these issues a little bit later. But Kevin, your perspective obviously is a little bit different, and I was wondering if you could perhaps talk us through your review of 2019.
Yeah, sure. And then good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. To kind of follow up on Torsten's comment, I normally spend my time looking at all the technologies. And Claire, when we met up at the end of European Utility Week last year, at the end in November 2018, I had kind of said to you that there's no real new killer technology coming out in terms of hype, and thankfully that's all gone away. You know, we had the whole thing with blockchain and AR and AI and you name it, right? There was something going to fix everything. That's all kind of died down. And even at the end of last year, to kind of Torsten's point, people were going, we just got to get on with it. And what I have seen, and I would certainly agree with Torsten, is that utilities, energy companies across the board, all sorts of companies, have just been getting on with it. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the concept of they've always been collecting a lot of data, right? Everybody put in IoT things, so fine. But now they're starting to use that data. To Torsten's point, they're starting to get value out of it, and I didn't know I could do this, and I could find that, and suddenly I can start building better products and services, and. So I think that's accelerating, and all these kind of cool technologies we were talking about for the last 3 or 4 years, augmented reality and blockchain and drones and image recognition and IoT and they've not gone away. And what I've been pleasantly surprised with this year is we've started to see companies taking a bunch of those kind of technologies and putting them together into a bigger system. And what I mean by that is you have Intel that announced their network digital twin, basically making an entire digital twin for simulation and planning of an entire grid. Siemens and Bentley have been doing the same. And when you dig under the covers, they're using all the IoT data, this dark data. They're using images from LiDAR, from drones, from body cameras. They're putting it back out in AR headsets for the workers to see asset information. So a lot of these things are kind of coming together. So there's no big hype about them anymore, but to Torsten's point, stuff is just getting on. And I would certainly go that I suppose the one of the ahas for me in 2019 was around software. And it wasn't that it was new software. It was, now I got my head around what I can use the software for, and now I realize what data I have, and I haven't been using it. So people have been pragmatic in terms of just getting stuff done, and we've seen a lot of advancement. AI means many things to many people, but there's a lot of clever people out there developing algorithms or just interpreting the data and coming up with clever ways of finding out predictive maintenance and taking cost out and what are the customers doing and whatever. So that's been, it's kind of the maturity is increasing. So that's been good to see. I suppose the other standout in terms of technology for me has been what's happened around energy storage. Not necessarily an IT topic, but if I look at what's been going on with the different types of chemicals that are used in batteries, the new mechanical models, you've got different materials, flow batteries. There's a lot of investment and innovation going into how can I store energy in whatever, putting compressed air under the sea, or can I put big weights up on top of a hill and roll them down, whatever. There's all sorts of new innovations, and even, there's still people bringing out new materials to paint wind turbines because you get a 2% more efficient wind turbine because you use different paint. So that kind of technology innovation, that's not slowing down. We'll talk about it later, but if you look at what Gartner are predicting in terms of new technologies and whatever, if you thought 2019 was fast, hang on to your hats. But I do think that whole energy storage has seen dramatic improvements. And I honestly believe a lot of it has been driven by corporates or different communities kind of going, look, yeah, we can't stop waiting anymore. We just need to become a bit more self-sufficient. So we do need battery storage, and the price is going down and will continue to go down. And, everybody's using different technologies, and I'm sure we'll come on to hydrogen and stuff later. So that's been fascinating. That's been ramping up. But yet, I suppose, and one of the big takeaways from European Utility Week a couple of weeks back was the frustration across the board that we're not moving fast enough. And even though there's a lot of good stuff being done, say, in the energy industry and electrification of the energy industry, you then look at transportation and air travel and sea transport, heating. We're just starting to scratch the surface. And I suppose we always talk about the energy industry is in a big transition. Look at the auto industry in the past 6 months. I had the opportunity when I was at China Utility Week, back at the start of the year. We stayed on and we went to the Shanghai Auto Show, and the amount of Chinese companies with electric vehicles. And now we've seen a lot of announcements from all the European auto manufacturers in the last couple of months in terms of going completely electric. Now that has consequences on workforce and layoffs and, but, look at the change in the auto industry, and I'm sure we'll come on to it. Electric vehicles are going to drive all sorts of change in 2020. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks very much. I definitely think that the hydrogen conversation is one that we need to pick up on, and definitely the electrification of just about everything. Areti, from your perspective, you obviously have quite a broad base in terms of the types of people and the number of people that you speak to on an annual basis as you're preparing for European Utility Week. Can you perhaps give us some of your thoughts in terms of 2019?
Yeah, here at Enlit, we start our year every January with our advisory committee meeting, where we invite experts from the energy sector, mainly from Europe, but not only. We sit down, we brainstorm for a full day, and the outcome of that brainstorm is what gives the basis for our program. Now, Enlit is going to have its no longer advisory committee meeting, but impact circle this January in Amsterdam again. And what I wanted to say is that the outcome of past January was quite interesting because you discussed with, as you said, I discussed with many people, and there are disagreements, there are agreements, but there are some topics where everybody agrees upon, that they are interesting, that they want to know more. In 2019, we had that agreement, let's say, on topics like the digital utility as an enabler of the consumer-centric system. And the outcome was a very nice presentation of Elia and Fluvius on that subject particularly. So collaboration between a TSO and a DSO on creating a platform of a consumer-centric system. Whoever is interested in hearing this presentation can do so on our website, on the Enlit website. Another topic was on digital technologies. Yes, software is important, even if it's not so new anymore. And we saw them mostly not as a strategic, let's say, abstract, not in their strategic abstract form, but as problem-solving mechanisms. And so, for example, we took AI, we took VR, and we saw some cases, some user cases, and we presented how AI, for example can help, or VR in maintenance, for example. Another topic is cybersecurity, which is always important, and everybody is always saying how important it is, but no one is willing to talk openly about it, especially from the utilities. It's a hush-hush still topic that hopefully will open up in the future because it is needed. The last topic I want to focus on, which was a very happy surprise for me, is ethics. More and more people are interested in the ethical ramifications of their choices. Same goes for the energy sector. Like, for example, would you allow an algorithm, let's say that you're driving an electric autonomous car, and you are about to hit a pedestrian if you don't turn right. But if you turn right, you will kill yourself. Would you allow an algorithm to make that decision for you? This is just an example. So I think that those four topics were the most important for us in 2019, or let's say the most hyped ones. And yeah, we'll see if they will survive also for 2020.
Thanks very much. I know that you and I have had the conversation about ethics before. Of course, our focus was very much on time travel. but I think that that's one definitely that both Kevin and Torsten will probably have an opinion on. Jen, before we get to that, though, I'm going to ask you if perhaps you can share some insights, particularly because you're based in the US and therefore you're our resident expert.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far, but thank you so much for the opportunity, Claire. I want to start by saying thanks to you because I've been covering the renewable energy industry for 12 years. And I recently expanded my role to cover the distribution grid and the energy delivery industry, so that's utilities. So I write about this news every day, and sometimes it's hard for me to see the forest for the trees. That's a U.S. expression, so it's good for me. I appreciate the opportunity to take a step back and look at some of the key kind of overarching trends that I've seen this year. So I've got three for you, and the first one I'm calling Energy Delivery Woes. Changing climate and changing customer expectations. So Pacific Gas and Electric, that's California utility, was in the news a lot in 2019. Started with the potential looming bankruptcy in the beginning of the year, which was a result of the fires from the previous year, from 2018. And then we were talking all about the fact that they did declare bankruptcy. And then as fire season rolled around, the talk was about what they called public safety power shutoffs, where they actually shut the power off to customers in order to keep people safe from fires. So there were just a few months in between where we could write about other things. But anyway, in addition to writing the news, these events helped us shape our educational program at Distributech. So we focused a lot on natural disasters and how utilities respond to them, both in terms of customer communications and customer service, but also in terms of incidents and outage management, how utilities must respond to those. So sessions like preparing the grid for the unexpected and the future of outage management systems, those were key in 2019. And indeed, that theme of preparing for the unexpected continued throughout the year. Itron released its cutting-edge research on resourcefulness, and that looked at whether or not utilities feel prepared for incidents and whether or not their customers believe they are prepared. And in that research, they uncovered a really interesting disconnect where utilities said they felt very prepared for natural disasters, but utility customers thought their utilities were not prepared for natural disasters. So it was very interesting on that. So also key to helping utilities manage those types of incidents, distribution automation, data analytics, digitalization, which we've heard about, and asset management. Those are all really key topics for Distributech. Okay, so my next theme, energy storage to the rescue. So we talked a lot about energy storage. Kevin talked about this as well, particularly battery energy storage in 2019. In fact, we found that our energy storage track was the most well-attended track at Distributech in 2019, and for good reason. There's a lot that energy storage can do to help utilities meet all these different pain points that they're facing. So they can combine it with solar to facilitate the closure of coal and natural gas plants that are currently being used for peaking or seasonal needs. So if you have a natural gas or coal plant that's just being used to meet peak demand, you can replace that with an energy storage facility and done. You can also boost up your resilience. So battery storage was being used after dark for Arizona Public Service and Hawaiian Electric. So this is a time shift. They have programs called Solar After Sunset and Renewable Dispatchable Generation. So again, on the resilience part, a project in Arizona with APS demonstrated, again, how they had this growing load at the end of a long transmission line, where in the past they would just boost up that transmission line, replace it, and then they would have this overbuilt system. They ran the numbers and realized that if they just put in a battery system at the end of that line, they would solve their problem, give that load at the end, that village, a more robust system, a more resilient system, and they would save some money as well. So lots of different ways this battery storage is being used. And then my last point is decarbonization and renewable energy. I said I've been covering renewables for 12 years, so this is near and dear to my heart. Indeed, the U.S. president has begun the process of officially withdrawing the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accord, and the UN recently released a report saying that drastic action is the only way we will avoid disastrous effects of climate change, and that we as a world are way off track. That's the bad news. But the good news is that utilities, cities, towns, and companies all over the U.S. are making their own renewable energy and climate pledges. So I didn't count, but I've reported on more 100% renewable energy by X date pledges in 2019 than I ever have before. We now have 7 states in the U.S. that are committed to meeting 100% of their energy needs with renewables by 2050 or sooner. That was up from 2 in 2018. In 2019, New Mexico, Nevada, New York, Maine, Washington were added. We have Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico. We have 135 cities that have made those commitments. And indeed, the RE100, which is an organization that tracks the companies that have committed to 100% clean energy by a certain time frame, they have now passed their 200-member milestone. They just passed that in November. So we've got a lot of companies taking a stand and committing to 100% renewables. So I'll stop there. I've got more to say, but I'm over my time. Back to you.
Jen, thanks very much. When we when we get to the end of the year, we always try and do some predictions ourselves on the smart energy international side. And some of the things that came in to discussion at the end of 2018 going into 2019 were things like the fact that broadband would continue to be a very big topic. And Kevin, I know that you don't feel that there's been perhaps significant movement in that area. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, I suppose my specific comment was in relation to 5G and more bandwidth coming for everybody. And whether you're running a oil and gas refinery or a power plant or a grid, communications are key, right? Back to Torsten's point earlier, you can have all the best software in the world and algorithms, but if you don't have the data or you can't get it in real time, then what's the point? But I don't, personal opinion, I think 5G is going to be great, but it's not going to happen next year. There may be some companies deploy private 5G into big campuses or something, or refineries or whatever. But I personally don't see 5G suddenly revolutionizing the ability to enable electric vehicle charging next year, right? That's not the technology that's needed or is going to do it. So as I say, I think networks have got better, but I don't think bandwidth's holding us back right now.
No, I agree. So some of the other things that came up as well was that some of the people that we spoke to said that they felt that there'd be a lot of blurring between the lines between traditional utilities and players within the oil and gas sector. And we've certainly seen the likes of Shell and BP quite actively following that trend, investing in a lot of renewable energy companies or electric vehicle companies or startups. But I think for me, perhaps the two most significant events of 2019, and they're certainly things that I don't think any of us could have predicted, were the blackouts in London, New York, Venezuela, Indonesia. Those, I think, were things that for the beginning of the year definitely took everybody by surprise. It was also very interesting to see I think the complete lack of acceptance that there was from consumers with regards to blackouts. We have gotten to a point where people expect to be connected at all times, and I think that was quite an interesting dynamic for utilities to have to face this year. And then the other thing that I don't think any of us would have anticipated was the rise of climate consciousness to the extent that it has. I certainly don't think that anybody thought that a 16-year-old girl would literally change the dialogue as far as climate was concerned. Any comments from any of you before we start moving on to our predictions for the next year?
If I may, to be honest, I don't think that it was only the doings of a 16-year-old girl that brought this change. I think we've seen it. I think that this 16-year-old girl is actually the product of a shift in people's minds and let's say ethical affiliations. So the more, let's say, the better educated we get, the better lives we get, well, the more we think about environment, our future, our children, our, animals even. So the more we have time for ethical questions, ethical moral dilemmas, etc. So I think, for me, it's not so surprising that we're going that way. I just hope we continue and we get some solutions also.
That I would just add something. Yeah. Hey, Claire. So I found it so interesting when I was in Europe at LIT. I did hear that loud and clear that there's this great climate consciousness. I don't hear that in the U.S. I really don't. It's not, I mean, sadly, in my world, people are the people I talk to, but it's not mainstream yet. Not the way it is more so in Europe.
Yeah,
that's true.
Kevin, you've done a bit of traveling around. Is that something that you found?
Yes, but I think I've said this before to many folks that know me. When I went to the States, 20, 25 years ago, we kind of look at the States as one country, and all the states are different, and even within states, they have very different policies. Yes. And Jen, I think you called out some states are going to be carbon neutral before some of the European countries, right? So it a lot of this stuff is so local. But I suppose a couple of quick comments was, outside of the technology world, my biggest surprise this year was the rise of that social activism, and it's brilliant. Yeah. But I was probably a bit cynical. I just thought it would just go away, right? Like whatever to the Fed, and someone will post a nice Instagram picture and they'll forget about it. But I do think that's going to, when we get onto it 2020, I think that's going to be the biggest driver, and that's going to force change because politicians want to get re-elected. So I think that's going to be fascinating. And one thing, Claire, if I may, we sometimes give utilities and energy companies a hard time in terms of, they should do things faster. And yeah, they should. And God knows they're not perfect. And there have been some bad things happened. And, California, Jen, you called out and shutting off the power to millions of people, right? Who thought that would happen? Right. Find the power outage in the UK and whatever. But a lot of us work with folks in the utility and the transmission operators day in, day out. The amount of stuff the amount of mini crises they actually get rid of, I live here in the south of France. The place has been flooded out for the last couple of weeks, and yet the power stayed on. That didn't happen by accident. So I do think they should get credit for keeping them on as long as they do. But I think, Claire, to your point, or somebody made a point there already, that the backlash, people, what do you mean the power's not working? I think people are starting to understand, this is complex. Hang on a second. So we do need to think about it. So I think that will play into a lot of dynamics in 2020.
Absolutely. I think that one of the biggest challenges that our utilities face is that when they do something right, nobody notices. And when they do something wrong, nobody forgets. I have for a long time felt that they are a hugely unappreciated element of modern life. And I think that I think perhaps more to the point, it was just that the lack of understanding was something that took me by surprise. And I am hoping that, as Areti said, as our consumers become more educated, that perhaps they will, as you said, Kevin, also start appreciating just how very complex the system is. And that, I mean, there are a lot of very important men and women behind keeping the lights on and making sure that our cell phones are charged. Exactly. But the dynamic is changing. So it's going to be a fascinating 2020. Yeah. So actually, speaking of 2020, that quite nicely brings me into the future forward part of this discussion. And Torsten, I'm going to hand over to you. And can you please give some insight into what you think are going to be the big considerations for 2020? Yeah. What I believe, one of the things we're going to see in 2020 in general is that utilities are moving faster. So I'm quite sure when we have the same discussion in about 12 months, we will say, okay, in 2020, that was a year where utilities really moved fast and just make things happen. I'm quite sure we're going to see a lot of innovative services from utilities because the technology is there, the data is there. I think also they have understood the mindset is there. So 2020, I'm quite sure it's going to be one of the fast years. What I also strongly believe is that we're going to see more and more companies, both utilities or startups or new market players, providing lifestyle services. So the convergence between utilities and lifestyle may be driven by a 16-year-old girl from Sweden, maybe not, but we're going to see more lifestyle services, more convenience services, and the convergence between utilities and lifestyle providers, I'm quite sure we're going to discuss in 2020. But from a technical point of view, I think there will be two major trends to see. And one of the things we already started talking about, that is real time. So we will see
more and more applications of real-time data. And I want to give you one example. That is, in the German market, they have a regulation where they have to be able to redispatch all the distributed energy resources, the smaller wind farms and solar farms. And to do that, they would need real-time data. Or if you want to be a utility providing a flat rate service to the new generation of consumers, you would need real-time. So I'm quite sure, and I'm gonna bet we're gonna see a lot of intelligent applications using or leveraging real-time data. And what I believe from a technical point of view, what we're gonna talk about is in 2020 is then real-time AI and real-time machine learning. Because most of the artificial intelligence, most of the machine learning is more statistical, it's more static based, but I'm quite sure we're gonna see the first steps where companies use real-time AI, real-time machine learning to quickly provide intelligent signals. And I think we're gonna move into a world where forecasting was yesterday and the future is gonna be nowcasting as a buzzword. And the last prediction, I'm sure, and that builds on top in the end, on top of my platform utility, what I have seen in 2019, we're gonna see more and more utilities sticking into the idea of sharing economy for energy data. EDP in Portugal are already doing it with their open access, open data access platform. But I'm quite sure we are seeing the first real steps utilities are doing, sharing economy, energy data, and then building on top of a sharing economy for energy data, we will see more and more utilities engaging in the data economy, building marketplaces. As an example, CLP in Hong Kong, they provide Smart Energy Connect. So they have already started activities to build this kind of a marketplace for energy efficiency solutions. I'm quite sure we're going to see more utilities being either part of or driving that. And the last thing, I think building once again on top of platform utility idea is we're going to see more ecosystems like Elia or Fluvius, Resa, and all the other DSOs in Belgium has done, ecosystems like the Internet of Energy, where we will see all the parties in the energy system working together in a collaborative energy system to drive the energy revolution. So I'm quite sure it's going to be a lot of activities. It's going to be a fast year. It's going to be real time. And we're going to see the sharing economy of energy data getting more and more visible and creating results.
Thanks, Torsten. That was certainly one of the things that I know you and I spoke about at European Utility Week was a lot more companies wanting to use data as opposed to just collecting it, and a lot more effort being put into actually analyzing that data and making sure that it's available to a wider audience.
Exactly. And not only that, I really believe it's also moving more and more. And I think both Kevin and I said it several times, it's going to be real time. So next year, we're going to talk about data, yes, but we're going to talk about real-time data, real-time data, real-time data.
Torsten, if I could just ask, how do you think legislation like GDPR is going to impact on this data economy that you're talking about? Is it going to have an impact, or are there loads of clever people thinking of ways that that data can be utilized without impacting on privacy or security concerns?
Yeah, it's going to impact, of course, because what we see is what we have to do together with our clients to be part, with the utilities, to be part of the data economy. We have to provide the data in an aggregated level, so you wouldn't be able to identify, or you wouldn't be able to do anything with the privacy of the metering points or the client. But the sharing economy enables so many benefits for the utilities, being able to benchmark, being able to drive open innovation. So it is, of course, privacy regulations is always impacting, but on the other side, to drive innovation, to benchmark utilities, to create knowledge sharing across the industry, you don't need the data on a level which would hurt or sacrifice any privacy regulation.
Okay. Kevin, I'm going to hand the baton on to you, and perhaps you can share some thoughts on 2020.
Sure, and nobody said I'm right, but when you asked me to come up with a list, I was kind of going, how long do I have? So I kind of got 4, and one of them kind of ties. Well, I narrowed it down. So I got a couple of odd ones, I think, but I jump into one kind of linked to Torsten's one. You know, to be quite honest, and it kind of ties back to a lot of the stuff we chatted about earlier, technology in some ways is the easy bit. It's when the politics and society and human nature kicks in, and we've got elections, we've got the EU Green Deal, you know, whatever. How's that going to play out? God knows. But I do think it's driving a completely different dynamic. But one of the things that I'll throw out there, and people might laugh, but we were talking about blockchain for years and whatever. And I think blockchain is a great technology. It's a tool, but it was never going to solve the problems for everything. But it's just it's a tool. But if we see the frustration with people going, yeah, the energy system is complicated. So you know what? We need to start doing this stuff ourselves. And whether you call it energy communities in the EU or microgrids in the US or whatever, I think communities and people will kind of start going, you know what? We'll do this ourselves. And things like distributed applications that you build on top of blockchain, I'm wondering if we're going to start seeing some clever people put these together, like with open source, you know, the sharing economy that Torsten spoke about, you know, even INSOE with some brilliant stuff they're doing with the LF Energy, the Linux Foundation, and open sourcing transmission data. And then Claire, to your point, yeah, there are issues around GDPR and whatever, but there's an awful lot of data in the grid that's not related to an individual. It's just system data. And that can be used for making sure the lights stay on and balancing and microgrids and systems, blah, blah, blah. So I'm curious if we'll see kind of, you know, we spoke about new competitors and silos breaking down. I'm wondering if we're going to see kind of the democratization of energy and people just creating their own apps. That sounds weird, but check out what some of these folks are at, right? Anyway, I'm watching that one. In terms of technology, I think the big one for me in 2020 is energy storage technology. And I'm using that broadly. We're seeing all the stuff that's going on with batteries and lithium and different types of chemical compositions of batteries, and how do I get away from rare earth metals and whatever, because one of the things, you know, should some of the trade wars go on, a lot of different countries could do some interesting things around rare earths, rare metals, access to different things that we need for the energy transition. So that's way outside the technology world, but it's something we should watch for. But I do think we'll see a lot more with, if you look at folks using flow batteries, mechanical batteries, and we spoke about it briefly, the whole power to X, taking energy that we have today and turning it into hydrogen or ammonia or some synthetic fuels. Now, none of this is easy, and none of it is, it's going to happen tomorrow morning. You know, we talk about, oh, well, if the wind farm is curtailed, you'll just generate hydrogen when it's not. If you build a hydrogen generation plant with an electrolyzer, if it's not running for about 4,000 hours a year, you're going to lose money. So the economics of all this has to be played out. But this is back to the politics. We're seeing Japan, we're seeing Europe, we're seeing different countries making big commitments to hydrogen. So I do think that whole energy storage, from better batteries, and batteries, the electrification is being used everywhere. I was in a local garden shop 2 days ago, and they have an entire range of electric battery-driven lawnmowers, right? Now, trivial thing, but I was like, duh, I never even knew it existed. So I do think we're going to see battery storage, but not just battery storage for the 2, the 3, the 4, the 10 hours, but you know, how do we get power stored for the Ruhr Valley for the month of November in a salt cavern? You know, that kind of infrastructure. Another thing that I've seen come up at various events, and they're kind of way in the corner, but a bunch of the carrying energy events around the world, people have been talking about the water nexus. And what I mean by that is, do we have enough water in the right place at the right quantity to to support the energy transition. Because a lot of the things that we're going to be doing is displacing big power plants here, putting other stuff over here, but you might still need a lot of steam and water or for extracting raw materials and again, water comes back to, well, who controls the river and what country does it flow through? So the water nexus, I think that's something we should watch out for next year.
Yeah.
And the last one, very quickly, would be to play into some of the topics that you mentioned earlier. Areti, you brought up the thing about, do I trust the algorithm? Mm-hmm. You know, I've spent the last, too many years talking about new technologies, and I hear, there's a bit of fatigue. It's like, oh God, Kev's back here. What's he talking about this time? And we haven't even caught up with the stuff he talked about 2 years ago, right? And we haven't got it into production yet. But there's a bit of technology fatigue, but I think it's technology trust. And that plays into the trade wars. Do I trust stuff from this country, or do I trust the algorithm? And not necessarily is it for the driverless car, but what about the software that controls the grid? Is that going to make decisions without a person going, yeah, I need to decide?
Mm-hmm. Interesting points there, Kevin. Areti, before I hand over to you, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say thank you, first of all, for all the very interesting comments that we are getting in. We are going to try and address, or at least air, some of those before we close off today. Also, if you are interested in being part of our predictions for 2020 in the Smart Energy International magazine, that is the edition that will be distributed at Distributech, please feel free to send your comments in via the question and answer box. We'd obviously love to include as many diverse opinions and predictions as what we possibly can. Having said that, Areti, perhaps you can give some thought or give some idea about what you think 2020 is going to hold.
Yes, so funny that Kevin mentioned water, because water is going to be one of our focus points in 2020 in Milan for Enlit. I don't want to talk more about it, but it is going to be a very important thing for us. The second thing is education. In last European Utility Week in Paris, I was approached by Dionysis Papachristou from the Greek Regulatory Authority, and he brought me a board game. I don't know if you know that game, a snake or ladders, or I don't know how it's called. In Greek, it's snake, and they have adapted it in a way that educates young kids, age 5, 4, 6, on renewable energy. And now they are preparing a Monopoly game on the same subject. So I think that education is becoming more and more important for regulators, and not only, of course. And the last thing that I would like to mention is last month I was at the advisory board of Eurelectric for the new blockchain platform that they are creating. I think that this is going to be pan-European, and I think that this is a very interesting, let's say, initiative for the future of Europe in general and utilities. This is from me.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine used to always remind me that the future hasn't happened yet. So nobody knows what's going to happen. So it's fun to make predictions, but it's really, really difficult because we just don't know. But what I can do is give you a little bit of data in terms of looking at our Distributech 2020, which comes up at the end of January, where people are interested in. I mean, first of all, I can tell you that we're trending high. We've got a lot of interest in the event already, more than ever before. So hopefully that's a sign that we have, more interest in energy, period. You can think of those technologies that are creating devices that attach to the grid. The grid is expanding, and so we're having more people interested in it. We've got, I think 5G is going to be a topic that people are interested in. I think Kevin's really right. It's not going to happen yet, but it's certainly, we're going to keep talking about it. Energy storage, I don't see that slowing down at all. EV charging impacts, we're holding a co-located event on the impact of medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. That's put on by the Smart Electric Power Alliance. That's trending very well. It's got lots and lots of interest. So I think utilities are going to continue to explore those impacts of EV charging, IoT and SCADA. And then again, that utility of the future that Torsten talked about, what is the new business model to look like? Those are those are the things that I'm going to be looking out for more and more in 2020.
Thanks. It's been quite interesting, I think, to see how many of us have mentioned water as a key consideration. For those of you that don't know, I live in Cape Town, and we had a terrible situation in Cape Town about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, where we were literally almost completely without water. And that concept of managing water as a scarce resource is something that I think is becoming more and more obvious. And I believe that it's something we're going to see more and more governments and utilities paying attention to. So I do think that that is something that we're going to start seeing in 2020 is going to be a different approach in terms of metering of water and of addressing non-revenue water issues. And then also from my perspective, the one thing that I am quite interested to explore next year will be the role of gas in the global power sector, especially in light of moves by the European Investment Bank to stop funding natural gas projects as of 2021. So I think that that's going to be quite an interesting one to see how that plays out and how that is going to impact that sector and our efforts to decarbonize. And then, of course, one that has been mentioned before is electrification. And, of course, the continued move to not only electrification of transport, which is obviously a big one and needs a lot of consideration and I think a lot more incentives, but, of course, the move to electrify heating, which was definitely quite a big topic of conversation at European Utility Week. I guess also for me and definitely for Areti, another big move for 2019 going into 2020 is the change of name from European Utility Week to Enlit, which I think is a very exciting move for us as a company and is definitely going to give us an opportunity to really explore this new energy dynamic.
Exactly.
So before we get to the point where we're going to wrap up, I did want to ask, Kevin, I'll start with you. So you mentioned the concept of technology fatigue. Are we making too much of the technology hype?
We certainly have been, and whatever, every one of us in the industry has been responsible for some part of it along the way. I think the crescendo of this was the whole blockchain ICO thing a couple of, 2 years ago. You know, that was just ridiculous. You write a white paper and raise millions. That was fascinating. So I think a lot of people have kind of gone, whatever. Technology is great and there's a key role to play. And, if somebody comes up with a new way of storing energy that's sustainable and cheap and mass produced and it, that could be the answer to a lot of problems. But I do think the hype around new technologies, people have got wise to it in terms of, it's not going to fix it. A new technology is not going to fix things. It's what Thorsten and everybody said. It's joining the dots with a lot of other things, policy and social acceptance and.
I completely agree. I do also wonder if perhaps we're not a little bit like kids in a candy store. Every time a new technology comes out, we're raving about it when we haven't fully explored the potentials of some of the existing technology.
Agreed. And if I may quickly, I was looking at some of the comments here, people saying what's going on with future conventional power generation. There's a lot of stuff going on in terms of how do I retrofit a gas plant and how do I make it more emissions friendly because I can't turn it off. But to your point earlier, what happens when you can't get financing for this? And then somebody else mentioned about, well, hang on a second, why don't we use geothermal? And it's not just that you happen to have a volcano around the corner for massive geothermal. You can have heat pumps. Denmark are using salt water to get heat to heat Copenhagen. So if gas you can't get the funding to build or renovate a gas plant, then maybe suddenly heat pumps of all sorts of technologies become front and center for, we all have one in our house, look, who knows? I think, as Jen said, the future hasn't happened yet. So.
Right.
Exactly. So I'm just having a look here at some of the questions. One of the questions that I think is quite an interesting one, and I'm going to pose this to all of you, is what happens if there is a downturn in 2020? What happens to all of the predictions that we have been making, and what do you think would be switched off in terms of the initiatives that we have addressed? Kevin, why don't you start with that one?
that easy one.
Lucky you. Yeah.
Well, okay, just purely from a technology point of view, to be quite honest, yeah, if there's a big downturn in the world economy, a lot of new innovation technologies kind of stall, right? The funding dries up and the VCs run for cover. But then what typically happens is either companies that have already invested in what Thorsten called the digitalisation, they start reaping the benefits. Or you see people investing in some technology to try and make them either cut costs or make new money. So again, energy storage, the need for energy isn't going to go away. So someone has to find some way of funding it. So, but I do think if the economies go through the floor, you know, I worry for our climate change goals, because people will just see it as I just need to put food on the table.
Yeah, I think as Areti mentioned, is considering the ethics of our behavior is something that you can do when you are well fed and the lights are on and you're warm. When you are struggling for survival, it literally is every man for himself. Areti, do you have anything that you would like to add to that?
Yes, I was thinking of adding something about 5G, but then I saw a question about nuclear, and I changed my mind. So nuclear, yes, it is very important. I'm not one of the people that are afraid of it. I think that if controlled and if used in small packages, if I may say so myself, it can be quite revolutionary and quite helpful. I don't think we're into it as much as we should, but come to late 2020 in Milan and you will see a lot about nuclear, because yes, it could be one face of the future.
And Jen, from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, you know, I would echo I worry about our climate change goals. If we had a big downturn, I think utilities just stop investing in new technology. And so they go with what they've got and they just put all their plans on hold. So in terms of specifics, what gets cut first, that I'm not able to answer. But I do think they just, hold your horses, let's take a step back and wait, and maybe put off our investments for, 3 to 5 years until we're out of this.
But Thorsten, what about you?
Sorry, I had muted. Yes, now I'm back. What I believe is what Kevin also said. When we get this downturn, what's going to happen is a lot of innovative projects will be stopped, unfortunately, and that would be, of course, a shame. What I really think what utilities have started is this transformation of the IT landscape, where they implement modern big data technology to build these energy services we need to have in place to drive the energy transition. And typically, I believe this kind of IT transition would be one of the first things, unfortunately, people would stop or do a break on it, because in the end, it's all about delivering the energy, unfortunately. So I don't hope we're going to be there. Yeah.
We are almost at the end of the time that has been allocated to us. And what I would like to do is offer our speakers for today an opportunity to just give a closing thought. So, Thorsten, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Kevin, Areti, and Jen.
Yeah. As I mentioned in my prediction, I'm quite sure And most of the people who know me and who know Kevin too know that I'm quite competitive. So I like to do a bet, and my bet is that 2020, the utility is going to move that fast. It's going to be a year where we see a lot of utility innovation driven by data, driven on data, and I am quite sure we're going to see these energy services evolving much faster than it did the last 10 or 15 years.
Thank you. Kevin?
I admire Torsten's optimism, and as I say, I live in hope. Glass is always half full. But what do I hope for 2020? I hope some people make decisions. And what I mean by that is we've got the EU Green Deal, there's elections, you know, whether you're left, right, Democrat, Republican, Conservative, Labour, somebody make a decision. And whether that's we're going with hydrogen or we're going with heat pumps or we're whatever, and we're electrifying everything and we're banning diesel cars, somebody make a decision and the rest of us will just live with it. But the time for complaining is over. Somebody make a decision.
I like that. Rachel, what about you?
My hope for 2020 is that the EU Commission will continue with environmentally friendly regulations, but also will create regulations that enable innovation.
Jen?
That was it.
All right, I'm going to add on the innovation. I am hopeful about the new technologies that are coming out. I did not mention Initiate at Distributech, but this is a program for startups in the energy industry. We are more than doubled, or almost doubled, excuse me, for 2020, and it's exciting to see companies that are creating innovative solutions to the issues that utilities are plagued with today. And so I urge everyone to come to Distributech, check out all the new companies that are there.
Thanks very much. I would like to just say to all of you who have joined us this afternoon, whatever your hopes and dreams are for 2020, may they all come true. May you be blessed with good health and lots of friends. From us here at Smart Energy International, thank you for joining us. And to our speakers, again, thank you for your really, really interesting insights. It's been an absolute pleasure having the opportunity to speak with you. Phil, over to you.
Well, it's very difficult to say nearly as well as what you just have, Claire, but thank you very much to yourself and, of course, to our experts for a very deeply interesting and insightful conversation. The sheer scale of the possibilities and savings and new operational efficiencies that the future can bring are exciting indeed. If you have any questions which we have perhaps not been able to address over the course of today's session, we will be forwarding them to our experts and we will get back to you with answers as soon as we possibly can. If you have any colleagues or friends who might be interested in this webinar, it will be available as a recording as from, well, just a couple of hours from now. So please do direct them to smart-energy.com. From all of us at Smart Energy International, thank you for attending today's webinar. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.